Okay, it's time to start now. Hello everyone and thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Yavor and I'm a CG specialist at Kills Group. Today I'm going to show you Viewtree for Rhino. This is a major update which will change and speed up your workflow with Rhino and boost your results. Before I start, just for your information, here with me are my colleagues, and if you have some questions regarding VRay, please feel free to drop them a line in the chat box. VRay is an industry standard in the architectural pipeline. It's also used in many other industries like product design or jewelry, automotive. Today, a very large number of top architectural studios use VRay in their everyday work. The same is in the visualization industry as well. Let's take a quick look at the advertisement, automotive and design customers of VRay. Here you can see listed some very popular and huge companies. All of them rely on VRay for visualizing their beautiful products. And now you can join us and choose the same powerful rendering engine. As probably the most of you already know, VRay is a user-driven software, and what Kills Group developed is for the user's needs, and that's you guys. Viewtree for Rhino is designed to streamline the workflow of people who have no experience in rendering, and also for those who have expert knowledge. So with a few clicks, all of you can create out-of-the-box high-quality renders. With this version, you have the opportunity to spend more time designing and being creative than setting render parameters. Here you'll find a large toolset for shading, lighting, and rendering. Viewtree for Rhino is very easy to learn and work with. On the other hand, has a large amount of features and can be used in production versatile workflows. Last but not least, this is a VRay, which means fast ray tracing. In today's webinar, I'll start with an introduction of the new user interface and continue with more workflow-based scenarios using the new features in this version. And there are a lot. VRay 3 Core, based on the same app SDK as the other products in the Kills Group portfolio with the same render engines. Built-in material library with over 500 ready to drag and drop materials. VRay Swarm, which is the monitoring and management system for distributed rendering. Denoising algorithm to cut render time and remove the noise. One-click solution for VRay output. Clipper to do section cuts without alter the actual geometry. Aerial perspective effect to add depth to your image with realistic looking atmospheric effect. Grass and fur to create realistic grass fabrics or carpets, and VRay components in Grasshopper, which allows you to render Grasshopper definition directly without baking. In this session, I'll concentrate on showing you not just a list of features, but how you can use them in your everyday work, speed up your workflow, and fill the gaps in cross-platform scenarios. Let's start with the first thing you'll notice when install and open Viewtree for Rhino. This is the new and entirely different user interface, also called User Experience Design. Now the interface is more simplified with sliders and toggles. The interface is centralized, so you can find what you want easier and faster. You'll have everything on your fingertips, rendering, geometry, lights, and materials. Here are available all VRay parameters based on level of control and expertise, and contains everything you need to create your beautiful looking renders. You have a built-in material library with more than 500 materials in it, fully customizable for your needs. Based on VRay 3 App SDK Core, you can use different type of rendering engines: interactive, production, GPU accelerated, different GI engines, and VRay Swarm, the simple and scalable distributed rendering system, which I'll demonstrate you in Rhino in just a couple of minutes. Over the years, VRay evolves in a smart, easy-to-use renderer. Due to the last developments done to the core, VRay is now optimized in a way that it can take many decisions by itself, so you don't need to think about the technical part. Just be creative and enjoy your design work. Before I switching into the Rhino environment and start working with VRay, I want to share with you, in case you're curious, what PC I'm using. It's pretty standard. Single i7 processor unit, 6 cores and 12 threads, 32 GB of RAM, and the graphic cards are GTX 770 for the Windows and P5000 for rendering. Let's go now into Rhino so you can see all the cool features and improvements added to VRay 3. Here, in the Rhino environment, you can access VRay in 3 different places. The first is the menu panel here, when Rhino groups commands by their function. Here, in the VRay menu, you see render and render options, lights, object extra, materials, export, tools, and help. The second is from the command window here, where you can find it with a vis prefix, and all this is VRay itself. The third and most important and useful one is from the VRay toolbar, which is automatically created when you install VRay. This toolbar is split in 4 categories: VRay for rendering, VRay lights, VRay object, VRay extra. This icon over here is the most important one. Clicking on it, the VRay asset editor appears. From this window, you can control about 99% of VRay in Rhino. The asset editor, as I mentioned, is also divided in different categories. Materials, with material list of all materials in your scene, and quick setting, which allows you to work faster by finding the most important and useful parameters for the selected material. Light. This is a light lister for all light in your scene. Geometry. Geometry list of all dynamic geometry you have, like proxies, clippers, infinite plane, grass. Settings for rendering with VRay. All of these categories have different level of control, which you can access from the arrow in the right. For the settings, you have different parameters for quality, speed, GI, render elements, switches. For the geometry, you have settings of the different types of geometry. Selecting lights in the light lister, you have access to all parameters controlling this light: color, texture, intensity, different shapes, and different options. From the material section, you can create and modify materials using quick settings. These are the most important and used parameters per material type. Moreover, you can access all the parameters in the right panel, and if you feel comfortable with this, you can work that way. Let's go again to the render tab. By default, the render engine is set to interactive, which means you can start render once, change geometry, render parameters, materials, light condition, etc. and you get instantly a visible feedback from the scene in the render window called VRay Frame Buffer, or VFB. The render will get more and more clear over time. Let's stop the rendering for now. VRay can be used not only for rendering your final image, but also in the early conceptual phase exploring your design. You can do this simply by overwriting the all materials and textures in your scene with color or material, so you can focus on the concept and the design itself, not to the exact material. Let's render again and turn on the material override. Now I'm rendering with color override. Let's change this to material override. Now this is a global override of all materials using this one. Let's stop the rendering again. Using the interactive rendering, you can take advantage of your CPU or GPU power. By default, it's based on CPU utilization. With one or two processor units, VRay can render with more than 64 threads, and if you have a decent graphic card or more than one, you can use it to render with it. Activating the GPU from here, the rendering will be GPU accelerated. VRay will automatically detect your GPU no matter what graphic card you use, NVIDIA or AMD, and will do a self-configuration to use it. Now I'm rendering on my GPU and you see how fast the rendering update is. Let's turn off the material override and stop the rendering. Disabling the interactive mode from the toggle, you enter the progressive one. It's quite the same in the meaning that the render will get clear over time. Besides the bucket rendering in VRay, you have now another production rendering engine called Progressive. It's super easy to set the render quality by limiting the rendering by time or noise threshold. And when one of those two is reached, time or threshold, the rendering will stop. Another advantage of using this is that rendered appears right away, like using interactive rendering. So you don't need to wait buckets to see the whole image and if everything is like it should be. And the quality will get better and better. You can use progressive in case you want to working on your scene and change the render camera position, materials, but don't want to change the already started rendering itself. With this approach again, you can take advantage of your CPU or GPU, and even more. Another advantage of using Progressive Sampler is that now you can take control over the GI. You can set the preferred GI engine you want to use for indirect light calculation, brute force light cache or irradiance map. Disabling the progressive mode from the toggle, you'll render with VRay using buckets. Let's stop the rendering again. You can control the render quality from the slider here using built-in presets, or on different level of control you can set the noise limit, minimum, maximum subdivision, and for those of you who are experienced user and feel comfortable with all the settings, you can control the quality enabling the advanced settings here. Remember this level of expertise? Here are all parameters for the rendering with VRay. And now I want to show you how to leverage your resources using VRay Swarm. You can use it in different cases. For example, you have a dedicated for this purpose render farm, or if you want to use the existing hardware resources in your studio, in your team, department, etc. Let's turn on the swarm from the toggle here and start rendering. Before this, I just want to increase the quality. VRay Swarm is a simple but powerful monitoring and management system for scalable distributed rendering. This will automatically scan your network for Swarm licenses and will force every machine that has it to render your image. You can manage hardware resources on different steps. The first is using tags. For example, I make in advance this one. Tag means grouping some computers and use only them for rendering, while some others left free to be used from a colleague, for example. The next level is through a slider here, which means what percentage of the dedicated resources you want to use. Something really cool is that Swarm will automatically install and configure the VRay version you use to the slave machines, so you don't need to do anything here. You can monitor and manage each and every machine using web interface through the management button. Now I will type here render. So this is my machine I'm using right now. Anytime I can go to some of them and see what resources I'm using, about CPU, GPU, memory, network or storage. The render is ready. Let's turn off Swarm. I want to show you how you can work with a single machine only. Okay, now let's continue with the next topic, which is the render camera. Many people ask if our camera is physical one. Yes, it is. It's based on the real-world photographic camera and it has parameters like aperture, ISO, shutter speed. By default, it's based on exposure value amount, but you can control this by the primary parameters, ISO, f-number, shutter speed. Tweaking all these settings, like in the real world, we can think and work like a CG photographers. Find the point of view, set the frame, check the white balance and adjust your lens. It's the same with the depth of field, peak focus point and vignetting effect, and even more. You can now correct the lens to 3-point to 2-point perspective. Let's jump again to Rhino. Now let's change the camera position. I want just to turn off and turn on this layer and start using interactive rendering. Most of the time I will use the interactive renderer. Now here is the exposure value. If you're comfortable with the primary parameters, you can work based on levels of expertise using ISO, f-number and shutter speed. For now I will use exposure value. This means decreasing the value, the image will get brighter. Increasing this value, the image will get darker. Let's set again to something like 10 and talk about the white balance. Here, the white balance is a process of removing the unrealistic color cast, so objects which appear white will be rendered white in your image. The correction is the result of light color temperature influence to the object. So with this color light balance, you can correct the color's right appearance. Let's tweak this one and see how this will alter our image. Now let's go to the depth of field effect and enable this. The depth of field or focal depth is the distance between the nearest and farthest object in the scene that appears sharp in the image. Using this focus range based on the photography, you will achieve more realistic result. We can increase or decrease the defocus amount here from the slider. If you know the exact distance to the object you want to be in focus, you can type it directly here. For example, something like this. Yeah, for sure I don't know the exact distance, but now it's easier like never before. Just click on pick focal point and pick the right point that should be on focus and perfectly sharp. Let's decrease this value. As you saw, it's super easy and intuitive to work with the VRay physical camera, even if you're not a photographer yourself. Now, on this stage, I want to show you the VRay clipper. Let's stop the rendering now. The VRay clipper is a geometry plane which can be used to clip away objects or part of your scene. This is a render time effect and doesn't modify the actual geometry. Here I have clipper set in advanced. Again, let's start rendering using interactive renderer. In the geometry panel, here let's enable the clipper. Now you can move and tweak your clipper and you'll get a visible feedback of the result. By default, you can use object material for the section cuts. Or even more, you can set specific material only for the section cuts. Cool functionality of the clipper is include-exclude list, so I can exclude some objects from the clipper. And even more, I can use more than one clippers. As you can see, on this early stage of designing, this is very helpful and handy using clipper without altering our actual geometry. Let's stop the render now. Talking about rendering and cameras, let's connect all this with the environment lighting. I'll use VRay Sun and Sky system. Enhance the realism using aero perspective effect to add depth to the image with atmospheric effect or override the environment. Next, I'll show you how to use IBO or image-based lighting approach to light your scene with just one image, 360 degree, full or half floating image, EXR or HDRI. Let's jump into the Rhino again with another scene. Here in Rhino, let's open the asset editor and start interactive rendering again. This image I get out of the box. Now let's go to the light lister, select our sun and go to the parameters. Here you see that we have new sky model called Hosek et al. If you want, you can use the oldest one, CA Clear, but Hosek will contribute more realistic light to your scene. Now let's change the ground albedo color and the blend angle. This blend angle will change a nice way a gradient between the horizon and the sky. Now we can change and the filter color of the sun. Let's go into the rendering settings, environment and turn on the aero perspective effect. Whoa, it's really hazy right now. We can change the visibility range with these parameters or to change the thickness of the atmosphere. Let's increase this value. This seems better. Now let's change and the filter color again. The next thing I want to do is to select our sun and change the sun angle. VRay Sun and Sky are based on the native daylight system in Rhino and it's really easy to use this. This seems perfect. You see how with a few clicks we can create this image emphasizing the depth in it. Let's stop the rendering now. Now what I want to show you is how to use dome light with one 360 degree image. I'll go and turn off this layer. Let's change the camera position and create dome light. From VRay lights, dome light, let's create dome light. Select appropriate HDRI or EXR and you're good to go. Again, let's start interactive rendering. Now from the settings, let's turn off the aerial perspective effect. Now there's 2 points we have to discuss. The first is that the scene is too dark, so we have to increase the intensity of our dome light. The next is that we have really strong vertical perspective distortions here. Let's stop our rendering, go to lights, select dome lights, to the parameters and increase this value to 80. Now to correct the vertical shift we can use it manually or in VRay extra menu we can use guess lens shift. Using this button, this will correspond automatically to effects and will correct the vertical tilt in our image. Let's turn on the interactive rendering again. Okay, now the image is bright because we increase the intensity and we have perfectly vertical lines here using guess vertical shift. Again, In the light lister, select dome light and let's change the rotation of our HDRI. Going to UVWs and change the horizontal rotation like something 90 degree. This looks nice. Now let's go back and change the HDRI with another one, sunset. First of all, I'll go back and change the intensity from 80 to 10. Second, I'll go again to the HDRI texture and change the horizontal rotation. That seems good. Let's stop the rendering. Now let's see what you can do with the updated VFB window, VRay frame buffer. This is not only the rendering window. It allows you to view all render elements, keep the images in full 32 bits floating point format, allows you to make comparison between two renders. Using VFB history, you can keep history of previous rendered image or load color correction from them. You can make color correction instantly during rendering without jumping in another software. You can apply lens effect based on bloom or glare effect. Let's go again to Rhino. I'll close VRay Asset Editor. Let's focus on the VFB. Here we can apply some color correction based on exposure. We can correct the highlight burn to change the white balance, change the hue or saturation, color balance based on shadows, midtones or highlights. Let's enable the curve correction. Okay, and now what you can do is to enable the lens effects. From here, I'll enable the bloom effect. Let's see what we can produce right now. This is the bloom effect. Or even better, let's turn this off and I will use glare effect. This time I'll override not from image, but I will want to override my camera. Overriding the F number, I will produce more strong result. Now let's decrease the blades. In the history, you can enable our history and save our image. You can load correction from another image or compare them. Everything is pretty easy and intuitive, right? You can create easily and quickly your renders. Shading your scene's object is a part of this pipeline. So let's continue with the materials. Now it's more easy than ever. Using material library with customizable materials, advanced procedural textures, and with one click you can convert one material type to another, keeping the maps and automatically set the correct parameters of the materials. Let's see this in Rhino. Let's open again the asset editor. You'll be surprised when you click this small arrow over here. You'll find a brand new material library with over 500 materials which ships with the installation of VRay. You can use all of the materials out of the box, you can modify them, and even more than this, you can share materials cross-platform. The VRay file format is universal cross-platform file you can use in 3ds Max, Maya, Rhino, Revit, SketchUp, etc. They will render exactly the same. Another power of VRay is this interoperability through the platforms. It can be useful in many cases in your workflow. Now, let's go and apply some materials. Let's start the rendering. Here, you see that I have applied in advance some base materials to the frames, to the structure, primary and secondary, and to the glass. Now, let's apply exact physically based materials. First of all, let's select the glass. Selecting scene, go to the glass, coated black, drag and drop, and apply material to selection. Next, let's set the primary frames. Select object in the scene, go to the metal, dark gray, drag and drop, and apply this material to the selection. The secondary, let's select in the scene. From the metal, let's choose anodized clear and apply to selection. And now what I want to show you is that you can not use only this library. You can create your own library, or you can be fed by another guys using 3ds Max, Maya, SketchUp, Revit, and use their library. The cool thing is that now the library is with ray traced preview in Windows browser, so you can see exactly the same materials. And now it's very easy. Just select your material, for example this one, drag and drop, and apply this. I want to apply to the frame panel. Select object in the scene, select new materials, and apply materials to selection. Now let's tweak this material with the quick settings. First of all, I want to change the diffuse color. Then probably I want to change the reflection and the glossiness. For the bump, I will increase this, and let's change the map here. This is a procedural texture noise with Perlin type. Let's change to noise and go back. Now let's stop the render. Let's see another optimization using VRay. This is the VRay Denoiser. I'll show how the Denoiser can help us and cut the render time. The concept is to render the image in one stage, usually with lower quality, and then on the top have a post-process to denoise this image and get rid of the noise in our renderer. VRay Denoiser takes an existing render and applies a denoising operation to it, removing noise but keeping the details. It relies on other render elements and can't calculate during the render or after this. Let's jump again to Rhino. Here in Rhino, from the settings, let's go to the advanced panel in the render element and select the denoiser. The denoiser will be disabled during the interactive mode, so let's go to progressive one. The denoiser is turned on, and you will see the denoiser has different presets: mild, default, strong, and custom. I will change this update frequency to 100. Let's start the rendering right now. During the rendering, I want to show something very cool, and this is a different swatches of our material based on their appearance. We have fabric, floors or ground, subsurface scattering, wall, and wall close-up. Now you need to spend some time rendering to fit the denoiser with enough information for the image after all. But when you get a perfect quality of your image, the denoiser take information from different render elements: refraction filter, reflection filter, diffuse color, world normals, position, the focus amount, because in our image we have depth of field effect, and noise level. Here you can see the denoised result, and from this here we can produce right here this denoised image. Again, with time and feeding the denoiser with lot information, we can get a perfect result in less time. Let's stop this render. Let's talk again about cross-platform sharing information and interoperability. I showed you already the first type of VRay geometry, the clipper. Now I will show you how to use proxies. This is a way of exchanging geometry data between different applications via VRay. The VRay proxy is a dynamic geometry and imports geometry from an external mesh at render time only. The geometry is not present in your scene and doesn't take up any resources. This approach allows you to render scene with many millions of triangles, more than Rhino itself can handle. You can create VR mesh. This is the input of the VR proxy in Rhino or another application, or convert geometry with PLY, OBJ, BIN, GO or ABC extension to VR mesh file using a specific tool called ply to vrmesh.exe. This you can find in the tools folder located in the root folder of VRay for Rhino. VRay for is another type of dynamic geometry. Again, this type of geometry doesn't exist exactly in the scene. You can see a rough representation of it, but the geometry itself will be bit and appear only in render time. Using this functionality will help you in cases when you have to manage a heavy geometry in your scene, grass, cars, trees or any vegetation, high poly geometry of all types. Let's go to Rhino and do this. Let's start again with enabling the VRay Asset Editor and start interactive render. Here you can see we have some pawns, and these pawns are proxies. Going to proxy listers, let's go to 3C, and from the advanced settings let's navigate this file not to be pawn but something else. Let's go to tropical tree. Stop the render and relaunch it again. Now you can see a different representation of the same proxy, but we loaded a different file now. Going into the material list, let's go and find out this material. It's 301. This material has two-sided materials for both of IDs, for the trunks and for the leaves. Now what I want to do is to change the first one from two-sided to realistic trunk. Perfect. Now you see that the trunk has one material and the leaves has another material. The leaves use two-sided materials. Let's see the two-sided materials. The two-sided material allows seeing the light on the backside of the object. You can use this material to simulate thin translucent surface like paper, cloth, tree leaves, etc. Now let's go and create grass. Again, here let's first select the object, the host of the grass, then in VRay object select grass. You see the grass is building in render time only with this rough representation in the viewport. What we can do is again going in the list of dynamic geometry, select this type of geometry and apply a proper material. Now let's go again to the geometry list for object and let's tweak first the length, then the thickness of the grass strands and the taper. Then in the distribution panel, the distribution is per area, but I want to increase this distribution. Perfect. Now bear with me a couple of seconds to see this result. You can see that here we have large amount of grass, trees in the foreground and the background, and all this doesn't present in the scene. They appear only in the render time. And this approach is very optimized for the rendering. Let's stop the render again and go to another topic. You all know about the virtual reality, right? This is the next goodie in the VRay set. One click to VR output. Using virtual reality output, you can easily immerse in your design or project. Now, I'll show you how easy it is to produce a VR content. VR image means to grab 360-degree information of your scene. You can do this in two ways, using spherical or cube map camera mapping. Let's go to Rhino and see how to do this. Here in Rhino, first I want to start interactive renderer. This is the standard photographic approach with strict field of view. Now I will stop this and let's see what we have here. You easily can convert your standard camera to spherical panorama or cube map. Using the first approach, your image will be mapped like sphere, a lot long. With the second, your image will be mapped as a cube. That's why the aspect ratio are different. The first is 2:1 for the spherical based on 180-degree vertical and 360-degree horizontal field. And for the second, we have 6:1 based on the 6 sides of the cube. Both of them have pros and cons regarding how easy it to see the whole picture, pixel optimization, seams, distortion and filtering. Here, enabling the stereoscopic effect, VRay will render VR image per eye, left and right, and these two images are shifted with a human-sized distance, the distance between your eyes, to get even more 3D virtual reality experience. Now let's see our image. VRay will automatically convert the aspect ratio and will get the vertical height, and on this base will calculate the whole image. Let's start rendering. Now we can see how our image looks like. This is stereoscopically cube map rendering. I'll stop the renderer now. I don't want to bother you with rendering process. Here I can show you how this image looks like. This image using squares, and these squares are arranged as left, right, top, bottom, back, front. Let's see how we can use this image using different players for virtual reality. This player I've had with the same image, stereoscopically rendered. You can use Samsung Gear or HTC Vive or Oculus Gear. Now let's jump to the last topic. For all of you who likes algorithmic modeling and wiring nodes, or just work with Grasshopper, I have a great news. VRay components in Grasshopper, and this is for real. Now they are fully integrated in Grasshopper. You don't need to bake or export anything. You can render with production or RT. You have a camera, you have materials, you have different lights. You can render only the Grasshopper flow or the Grasshopper and wherever in Rhino you have. Let's jump in Rhino and see how it works. This is my Rhino file and this is the Grasshopper definition. VRay components in Grasshopper you can find in the main toolbar, Simple Render and Render. The VRay components have to be manually copied from Grasshopper components folder in the VRay for Rhino to the root correct special folder from Grasshopper. This is a typical approach in installing components in Grasshopper. This definition here is copyrighted by Design Morphine Association, and they kindly share with me this definition. So let's start working with it. The first, let's see the flow using VRay. Everything starts with create renderer and start renderer. Everything in between you can create camera, add geometry or geometry at point, rectangular light, mesh light, different materials as simple material, SSS, OSL or VRScan materials. Now I wired these parameters here. I start with create renderer, add camera. I added two different lights, rectangular light and mesh light, with size, location, intensity, simple material based on color, reflection color and gloss, and add this geometry. Now when we enable this one, you will see the result. Here we can change our field of view or camera position and target position of the camera, or even the color. And this is the long flow. Now what I want to show you is the long story short. You can use, instead of this, simple render based on interactive or RT production or document render. Now I'll stop this render and use the RT. Again, this approach is to render the Grasshopper flow only. You can change anything to your flow. Now I'll change this factor of the opening. Keep in mind this factor is from the beginning and this flow is not so simple, so it will take time to recalculate everything. You can see that you have dynamic connection from VRay to the Grasshopper and even more. Now I will stop this, stop the renderer, and I show you how we can use Rhino, Grasshopper and VRay at the same time using geometry document. From here, the output here is list of 3 meshes. The input of the document render is list of 3 meshes. We have material that again is a list of 3 materials. Here these 3 materials in fact present in my scene here. This is the way I can connect materials to the algorithmic design. Now when I start the interactive renderer, you'll see that I have all these materials applied on my render, and even more, I again have this dynamic connection from Grasshopper to the renderer. And if this is not enough for you, I want to show you something really cool. Opening the asset editor again, going to geometry tab, let's enable the clipper. Now for the first time ever you can clip a mathematical definition using VRay. You can use object material here for the section cuts, or again you can use entirely different material for the section cuts. Let's stop this. I'm pretty sure that you'll find this amazing and useful. In this webinar, I showed you how VRay evolved in a smart, easy to use and powerful render engine, which will streamline workflow of the beginners and advanced users. The power of VRay is concentrated in a simple and centralized user interface, but you keep all the additional creative control in your hands. No matter if you work in one-person studio or in production versatile pipeline. Now, out of the box, with few clicks only, you can share data through platforms and achieve high renders in less time. Using Viewtree for Rhino, you spend more time designing and being creative than rendering. And all this you can use with the new online licensing system. You can use it in online mode or offline as borrow your licenses or use your existing dongle. If you like what you saw and you're interested in trying Viewtree for Rhino, just go to chaosgroup.com and download the full feature 30 days trial, test it out and give us your feedback. You can see some licensing info here for the render node workstation. Here are the prices for workstation, universal render node, rental and upgrade from VRay 2 to VRay 3. For more information, contact your local reseller or write us an email at sales@chaosgroup.com. Take a look at our official help site docs.chaosgroup.com for detailed info for each and every feature. Make sure to check our YouTube channel for existing and upcoming videos and tutorials. Chaos Group TV is a hub with a lot of videos, short tutorials, quick start guides and more. Join the VRay community. Thank you for taking the time and joining us today. Have a nice day. Until the next time. Bye guys.